Something happens to us when we find our place in this world. We can have a nice life, we can have nice things, we can have a nice job, we can have a nice home. We can find a place in this world where we're making a living and everything is okay, and that can be nice, and we can live that way forever if we want to. But there's something that this spiritual path promises. And there's something embedded in every single religion that promises that there is a place that is destined for us. A place that when we find it, our feet alone can fill it. That nobody has stood in that place before in the same way. Nobody can, and nobody ever will. Now, if you don't want to stand in that place that you were born to stand in, that's okay. But know that if you don't stand there, there will never be another person born who will even be able to stand in that place that is your place. And what does your place feel like? When you step into this place, and for those of you who know this place, because it's a feeling, you can feel it. You can't even describe it to people what it feels like when you're standing in it. It is a feeling that your feet are exactly where they need to be on this earth, that you are in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. It's a feeling of spaciousness, that around you there are no limitations, that nothing can say no to you because you got to be here and you got to do what you're doing. You can't not do what you're here to do. It's a feeling that everything around you is beckoning you out. The more you come out, the more life says, oh yes, we love that. Let's have more of that. The more you express yourself, life around you and people around you, everything is alight with the desire to have more of you. Bring yourself out into more of life. It's a feeling, and feelings are so hard to express. This spiritual path is about taking that journey to the place where when you put your feet on the ground, you know that it's your place. Now, a lot of us say, you know, I had a difficult upbringing and it was hard. My parents were such and such, and, you know, they drank or they hit me or they were difficult or they didn't recognize my talents. Read The Artist's Way, because The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron wrote this book specifically for people like the ugly duckling who were born into families where they weren't heard, where they weren't seen, where they weren't appreciated, where they weren't acknowledged. And man, I will tell you, probably 99% of this whole world is born into a family that doesn't maybe really get you, get all of you, or want you exactly the way you are. And I used to think myself that if only I were born into a family that really got me, that got how excited I was. I used to talk from the moment I could talk. I spent my whole babyhood in the crib just talking. And when my brother came, I never stopped talking. That was me. That ebullience and that joy and that happiness to be alive, that was just who I was. Except I was placed in a family where that ebullience and joy and light made other people nervous. So I used to think, God, if I were only born into the right family, the family that I should have been born into, I would have been encouraged and I would have been stroked and would have been, August, oh God, we love that joy. Give us more. Tell us another joke, August. And that was hardly what happened. And it wasn't until I began to shed the cloak of that thinking they call the victim thinking, where this world has done something to me against my will, God darn it, and because of it, I can't be who I'm supposed to be. Because of it, I'm not going to get where I want to get. Once I began to understand that there's no such thing as anything being done against our inner innate will, what began happening to me, as to many of us on this path, as you begin to look at what happens to you in a whole different way. you begin to look at what happens to you and you begin to say, what part did I play in this? If my soul, and they say this, some people say this, maybe you believe it and maybe you don't, it doesn't make a difference, I happen to, that our soul moves on from life to life, our spirit never dies, that ruach, that the Hebrews called, that the Israelites called the soul, it never dies. So if that is so, we have choices before we come into this life about what we want to do with this life, what we want to create here. And it makes perfect sense if you follow that line of thought, that then you get to choose things in this life to help you attain the very things you need to attain. So of course in our logical mind we say, okay, I want to get to this place in my life. I want to be a singer. I want to be a dancer. I want to run my own business. I want to be a corporate executive. And we think logically, of course, I'm going to set myself up to have the best family in the world, the most loving family, the most adoring family, who gives me everything I need every moment of the day, and then I will get there. However, looked at another way, what if we set it up? What if we chose the circumstances of our life to get us where we need to be? And the way we chose them is by putting directly in our path the obstacles that we needed to overcome in order to have the strength to be the kind of people we wanted to be. See, when everything is fabulous nonstop in our life, we don't build muscles. When we go into the gym and we lift 40 pounds, that's wonderful. But if we're lifting 40 pounds 2.5 years from now, it will be very nice lifting the weights, but our muscles won't grow. We grow when we overcome the challenges and the obstacles and the hardships and the difficulties and the rejections and the closed doors. We begin to grow in confidence in ourself. We begin to grow in self-respect. We begin to grow in belief about what we can do. We begin to grow in looking at ourselves, knowing we're the kind of person who can make it. So by the time we get to what we came here to be and do, we're so much bigger. We're so much stronger. We're so much more self-assured. We have so much more self-respect. We think that things need to be easy and then we'll do it. And I'm telling you that the way we grow, the way the soul grows, is by overcoming the very obstacles we have placed in front of us to overcome. And as long as we think that life is giving us these obstacles, as long as we think that life is against us, as long as we think that something out there is unfairly doing something to me in here, we are going to spend our life blaming this world and hiding in this world when our soul is beckoning us out to do just the opposite, to come. The Ugly Duckling is such a sad story when it starts. And the coolest thing about Hans Christian Andersen, he wrote this story in the 1860s. It is a spiritual and psychological root story. It's universal, the appeal this story has. The story of feeling like you were born into a home where you're not understood. They don't get you. You're not treated the way you need to be treated. You're not being seen. And what do they say? A life lived without love is a life of suffering. We're not getting the love we need. We're not getting what we need in order to survive, let alone thrive. And whose fault is it? Certainly it's not the Ugly Duckling. He was born, he was hatched out of the egg, along with all the other ducks. As far as he was concerned, he was fine. Sure, he didn't look like anybody else, but he was still him. He liked who he was. He was big and he was gawky compared to everybody else, but he certainly wasn't big and gawky compared to who he was. So we make a lot of noise. So we're bigger and louder than our parents want us to be. So we're not exactly how we should be. When our differentness begins to set us apart and we begin to be put down for our differentness, already we begin to feel that the place where we're living is too small. Tell me, on some level, if you put aside the logical, linear thinking of how things should be and how life should be, easy, wonderful, nice, open, free, and begin to see how your soul sets up your journey right from the start by putting you in a pot that is too small. Man, when we have plants and the plant outgrows the pot, we don't go into agony about taking that plant out of the smaller pot and putting it into a new one. Oh my God, I have to move it. And I'm not sure the plant is weeping either. It's too tight. It's not getting enough nutrients. It's outgrown its space. It's root bound. It's pot bound. It begins to wither. It begins to die. Course in Miracles says, when the vine stops giving fruit, prune it and cut it away and praise God. So we take this plant and we take this plant out and we put it in a big, spacious, pretty pot. Now it has more soil. Now it has a nice big space. Now it can spread out. On some level, when we separate ourselves from nature, thinking that human nature and nature are two different things, we think that our experience is completely and utterly different than the plants. Because that's all that our soul is asking us to do. We are put in a pot that is small. We've come here to do something large. We've come here with a large voice or a large vision or a large desire or a large heart. And when we are put in a pot that's small, instead of being welcomed, say, God, what a large child I have. What a special, fabulous, large child I have. What we're told is, God, are you loud? I'll tell you what I heard my whole life growing up. God, are you sensitive? Boy, are you sensitive. And it was entirely the truth. That was my gift. I was sensitive. That's exactly what I was. I could feel things. I could feel the meanness when there was meanness under the words. I could feel the coldness when there was coldness under the words. I could feel when somebody was unhappy and they were smiling instead. I could feel things. How wonderful that I had this gift. That I was then told, like the ugly duckling, like many of us are, oh, for God's sake, stop being so sensitive. Toughen up. What's the matter with you? This turned out to be my destiny, this gift. The ugliness, the differentness of this duckling turned out to be his specialness. And what was it? He was a swan. Of course he was different. I am a person who works with people. Of course I'm sensitive. Julia Cameron, in her book, The Artist's Way, tells the story of this young composer. When he was young, his parents always called him a dreamer. Oh, what a dreamer. Would you just put your feet on the ground? And what did he grow up to be? He grew up to be a composer, dreaming beautiful music, love stories in music that only a dreamer could compose. Because where does that come from? It comes from the place of your imagination. Of course he was a dreamer. When we are not rewarded for who we are, not only as a child, but as an adult, when we're working in a job and we're not recognized for our talents, when we're living in a relationship and we are not rewarded for who we are and accepted as is, when we're living in a lifestyle or living in a community or in a career where we are not getting the love and the support and the acceptance we need, life is saying, get a bigger pot. It's not a big deal, life is saying. It's not a big deal. Get a bigger pot, and I will help you. It's not like we have to go out and find this pot all by ourselves. Life is saying there are tons of bigger pots. Let me help you. But first we have to agree that the pot we are living in is too small. We are pot bound. What does it mean when a plant is pot bound? It can't grow. Now this we understand when we see the plants. It can't grow. It withers and it dies. But we think we're human beings, which is completely different than nature, our human nature, utterly different. We think that when we are pot bound and root bound and we sit in a job that is stifling us, that of course we can stay here for years and it's not going to hurt us at all. Oh, I can stay root bound. I can stay pot bound. That's okay. I can stay here for another couple of years and accumulate money if I have to. I can stay here and have my boss give me all kinds of trouble if I have to. I can stay in a relationship where there's no love if I have to, because the head says, oh, come on, it's only 2 more years. What's the problem? In 2 years, the plant is dead. And we fool ourselves into thinking that in 2 years, we won't be. In 2 years, I'm going to be the same person that I am now, except I'll have more money in the bank. Except I'll have figured out what I want to do with my life 2 years from now, and then I'll make the move. When I find the perfect pot, Then I'm going to take myself out of this pot. And the only way to find the perfect pot is to get out of the pot that you're in and begin the journey to finding the pot that is the right next pot for you. See, we think we're going to move from that small pot and move into the next perfect pot, and then we're going to live there forever. Okay, so I'm going to find that perfect thing, and I know what I'm going to do for a living, and then I'm going to be there, and then I'm going to do that. It's that instinct we have as infants where we just grab onto something because we feel so confident. Oh, I'm holding on to something. I got it now. Now I'm going to do this forever. It's very funny on the path. Sometimes you'll find people who write a poem or two and they say, wow, am I supposed to be a poet? Or a song comes out, wow, am I supposed to be a songwriter? And the life force is saying, can you just enjoy yourself here? Can you just write a poem for God's sakes or a song and not make a whole career out of it? You'll find out what your career is when you start making all kinds of moves in all kinds of directions. It's going to be revealed to you. And when is it revealed to us? It's revealed when we leave the pot. And I cannot tell you what sheer terror it is for human beings to leave their home pot. Because if they leave their pot, what will people think? If they leave their pot, nobody will love them. If they leave their pot, they'll be alone for a while. If they leave their pot, where will they find the next pot? If they leave their pot, will they find the next pot? And every one of those questions keeps you sitting in a pot that is too small. This journey is magnificent, and I'll tell you why. Because each pot leads to a bigger one. I'm not sure we ever even really arrive at the biggest pot we're supposed to be in. But I know that every one you leave is going to lead you to a bigger one. The hero's journey is to have the courage that it takes to take one step out of that pot, to acknowledge that if you don't leave that pot, you are going to die. And I use that word so specifically because we like to say you're going to die psychologically. You might die spiritually, you might die emotionally, but what we don't understand is that the only reason illness comes in our life is because we will not leave the pot we are holding on to for dear life. And illness says, I am here to shake you out, to shake you awake, to shake you up so that you'll let go. So that you'll let go and let life move you, let life help you move to the next pot. Come on. And all of our fears tell us that the unsafest thing in the world to do is to leave that pot. And everything on the spiritual path tells us that the only safe place for you to be, and healthy place for you to be, and whole place for you to be, is to leave that pot. And we got a real battle going on. So every time you open a spiritual book, know that you are pushing yourself out. There's no way to give an hour or two every week to your spiritual life. I'm going to study a week or two. I'm going to go work with somebody for a couple of months, and I'm going to be with them for an hour, or maybe I'll read a few minutes a day. The moment you open a book, the moment you say yes to this path, you begin to feel the confines of this pot you are sitting in, if indeed it is too small for you. That's why they say when you follow this path or you begin to seek the truth, they say in the Gospel of Thomas, if you begin to seek this truth, at first you're going to be troubled, and then you're going to be amazed. And why do we get troubled? Because the moment you start opening your eyes and seeing the truth of where you are, you begin to see what is not working and where the love is not. It's one thing if we're growing up and we didn't get the love from our family. Okay, we were 8, we were 6, what can you do? But now, when we're 26 or 46 and we're living a life where we're not getting the love, who can you blame? Nobody stops you from getting out of the pot except you. And in our psychological journey, in our spiritual journey through life, the only way we begin to reveal the truth about who we are is by stepping out of the pot. It is a necessary and inevitable part of every human being's journey on earth. We have to open up our blossoms and let what is inside out. There is no other way to get to what you're looking for on this path, to the love, to the joy, to the peace, to the happiness, to the you that you're looking for, unless you make this journey and open and know that it's safe to step out to the next pot. The ugly duckling had only one home, and it was a pond. And when he couldn't take the abuse anymore by all the other ducklings, he finally left. And he did not know anything that was sitting over the hedges. A lot of times we think that what's over the hedges is death. It's like in the days of Columbus. You're only going to ride so far in the world, and then you're going to fall off the other side. And a lot of times that's our fear. There's nothing out there. It's dangerous out there. It's dark out there. I can't go out there. When in fact your salvation is out there. Now here is the interesting thing. Between the old pot and the new pot, there's a space. And spiritually and religiously, some people call that space the desert. And all the wise men in all of the religions have made their trek through the desert. And every single fairy tale requires every single hero or heroine to make a trek into the desert or the woods in order to find their proper place, their proper next pot. Do not jump from pot to pot. Because most of us would jump if we saw that next pot and we held on to the last one, then we tippy-toed over and we could still feel the last one and then split our legs kind of, and I'm almost there and I'm almost there, and you're kind of hurting things inside, but that's okay because you're still holding on to the old and new, and as long as you're holding on to the old, it's okay to go for the new. In the meantime, it hurts a lot. Eventually, when you get hold of the new, then you can let go of the old, and then you think, finally, I'm safe. And what the spiritual path says is, first of all, you're not going to get that new pot. You're not going to get that new pot right in front of your face always, because part of what you need to do to reveal who you really are is to make that little journey to the next pot. Because that's where you're going to get your strength. That's where you're going to get your vigor. That's when you're going to start having confidence in yourself. That's when you're going to be alone maybe for the first time. And I heard this week that the reason we need to be alone is so that we can find out that we're never alone. And how do we find that out? We find that out through the period of desert that stands between our old life and our new, next piece of our new life. It's the desert that tempers us. In the book The Alchemist, charming, charming little book, also a fable. And what are fables? They're universal stories. And they're made like pretend stories, but man, there's your story, there's your path, there's your life myth. He goes through the desert, and it's in his going through the desert en route to his treasure where he gets strong, where he finds out he has talents he didn't even know he had. Our fear is that when we go inside, we're not going to like what we see. When we go through this period of solitary confinement, which is what it feels like, we won't make it to the other side. We'll be so alone we will die of this loneliness. And the truth is, when we step away from our old life, when we step away from living our life for our parents, or for our job, or for the almighty dollar, or for any reason other than living our life for the growth of our soul, when we begin to do that, that's when our true talents come out. That's when our true passions come out. That's when our true gifts are revealed. Then and only then. Thoreau said, where we begin to shine is when we begin to take off all of the teachings we were taught. When we take off everybody else's teachings, we are left with us. And that's when we begin to find out who we are. And what is this walk? This walk from the old pot we were raised up in, to the new pot, the next step. That's where we take off the old teachings. That's where we leave some things behind. Sometimes it means leaving a mother or father behind that says, I can't live without you. You can't go. Or a job that says, oh my God, the company will crumble without you. Or a lover that says, I can't believe you're leaving me. It hasn't been working for 8 years, but I'm sure it will one day. Or whatever it is we are leaving that is not working, an apartment that is too darn small for you to expand in. A relationship that's too darn small for you to grow in. A job that is too darn small for you to come out and be amazing in. The moment we leave it, we think we're going to die. And I tell you that the moment you leave it is the very moment when you begin to live. And you begin to live in a way you haven't before. Because when you take a plant out and move it to the next place, It's dangling there for a while. The roots are all dangling out, and you can feel it. I'm sure it can feel the air moving back and forth on its little feet. And it's like this nice place, and if you don't get freaked out, it's this place where there are no rules. It's this place where a lot of things can happen. It's this place, as Deepak Chopra calls it, of limitless possibilities. We don't know that there's another pot coming. We're just kind of here. That's what the desert was. When the Israelites landed in the desert en route to the land of milk and honey, en route to it, they were in the desert. They just went over the Red Sea. Moses took them through successfully. And there they were on the other side of the Red Sea after being slaves, beaten and kept as slaves for I don't know how many hundreds of years. They get to the other side and they look around and it's desert, for Christ's sake. It's sand. There's nothing here. This isn't the land of milk and honey. And they turn to Moses and they say, what'd you take us out of Egypt for to bring us here? We don't want to be here. We wish we were back there. When we're in this place of the land of limitless possibilities where we cannot see what's going to happen, we assume that nothing's going to happen. And the truth is, we are in the land once we leave our pot of limitless possibilities where everything in the universe conspires to help us. This is not a fairy tale. It is the truth. And I know it's the truth because I live this truth and I see it working in people's lives all the time. But man, we have to be willing to know that our journey lies forward. The moment we tell the life force, do not move through me, do not make me move forward. I want love and I want this and I want that, but I'm not leaving my house. I hope you can bring this to me while I'm sitting on my couch doing the life I've been doing because I hope I don't have to change anything. The moment we say to the life force, don't come in, don't remove the pot I'm in, don't help me, don't change this by changing me, that's when we stop life from happening. That's when death begins. That's when illness starts. This is not to put anybody on a guilt trip about illness. Hardly. But this, as Eva Pierrakis says in her guide lecture, she says this is the moment when our life begins to be peaceful and stops being so filled with suffering. The moment that we recognize that our outside life has everything to do with our inside life. They're one and the same. The inside life is the blueprint for the outside life. That's Buddhism 101, cause and effect. That's when struggle and suffering begins to end. But man, to make that move. We have a woman in our congregation, I don't know how many of you know her, Michelle. Michelle is lifting herself up from the pot, and she is moving forward, and she does not know where that next pot lies. She knows where the resting place in the desert is, but she doesn't know where the next pot is going to be, her next place. She only knows about the rest stops in the desert. And when we're in the desert, a rest stop is a fabulous thing. So she is going to leave this Thursday, and she's going to travel for 27 hours. She's taking a plane to Heathrow, and from there a plane to Bombay, and from there a plane to Bangalore in India, and from there a train to Puttaparthi. Thank you. Puttaparthi. 27-hour flight. Party is really the wrong word, I'm sure. Don't expect a party on this leg of the journey. Let's not kid ourselves. But what's so interesting is that life will help us know when it's time to change pots. That's the beauty of life. It helps us know. Sometimes we call these things crises. Sometimes we say, God damn, how could this, I can't believe this happens to me. I just lost my job. Or this just happened, my house just burned down. Or I have to leave where I am right now. And what that is life saying, you know what, you've outstayed your welcome in this pot. It's time for you to move on. So a beautiful thing happened. Her soul let her know while she was working on Wall Street that she didn't belong there anymore. And how did it let her know? She had what she calls a breakdown. And what does that mean? Does that mean, oh, poor Michelle, she's such a mess? Oh, God, too bad for her. If it were me, I know I could handle that kind of stress. What the soul does when it breaks down is it says your old way of life is breaking down. A nervous breakdown or any kind of breakdown of anything in the old life is your invitation to a new one. You stay there and you punish yourself for it, And you'll never get out of the blame. It's my parents' fault. It's my fault. It's my boss. It's this job. It's the workforce. It's swimming with the sharks. When in actuality, it's your soul telling you this is not your place. You don't belong here. And how do we know we don't belong here? When we are experiencing the kind of stress that makes us sweat. It's not Wall Street's fault. It's the fault of us being in a pot that's not a correct fit, because there are plenty of people on Wall Street who are absolutely thrilled about where they are because they belong there. How do we know the pot's too small? We're not happy. It doesn't fit. We're angry. We're irritable. Things break down. We're filled with stress. We're in pain. We're upset. We can't cope. All those things are telling us you don't belong here. How fabulous that life has a way of communicating to us if we can understand what it's saying. The next thing it said to her is, this pot's too small. Is her apartment burned down? Ah, what horrible luck, we say. What horrible luck, poor thing, bad karma. Must be bad karma from another life. When in fact life is saying, you don't even belong here in the home that you are in. You don't belong in your old life. Now nobody in their right mind wishes illness or crisis or anything on anybody. We all wish wonderful lives on everyone we love. And the more enlightened of us wish it, of course, for the people we don't love. But when it comes, instead of seeing it as a punishment, there it was telling her, your house has just burned down. She said a very interesting thing happened. She expected every one of her friends to come in and say, oh man, this is terrible. This is a horrible thing. I'm so sorry. I mean, who wouldn't say that? I'm so sorry. Oh my God, this is going to be so expensive. And she said, not one. Now this is interesting. Not one. Not a single friend came to her house and offered her 1 ounce of pity. In fact, she said the exact opposite happened. Everybody came and said, oh, this is a good thing. This is such a good thing that's happened. This is going to be such a new beginning for you. And no matter how spiritual we are, it's hard to hear that. We want to hear a little bit of sympathy. Come on. I loved some of these things. Tell me something. Give me a little comfort. And she said none of them said anything but what a good thing this was. And she said, I heard this message so loud and clear, that it was time for me to start a new beginning. But of course, when it's time to leave our pot, we don't know. We don't just jump out of the pot. None of us are asked to jump out of where we live and how we live into thin air. So she began praying. She began asking what this means. We know it means something. What does it mean? And she said she started to have the first dream, which turned out to be the first of a couple dreams. And in it she dreamt of a guru. And she's not a woman who's a follower of a guru, so it was odd that it was a guru. She dreamt of the guru Sai Baba, who is a Hindu avatar, which an avatar means he's the embodiment of the God consciousness here on earth. And he came to her in his dream and he said these simple words, it cannot start until you come. It cannot start until you come. And it was a dream so vivid that when she woke up, there it was. It cannot start until you come. Again, we don't just jump out of the pot. What's wise to do, what she did, what is wise to do is you begin to do what you can do, what you know you can do. You know you can pray. You know you can meditate. You know you can ask for help. You know you can begin to call on this life spirit that's helping you move to say, what does this mean? And what began happening around her, as Paulo Coelho says in The Alchemist, the universe conspires to help you, or Joseph Campbell says, the brilliant philosopher, 1,000 invisible hands come to help you. All of a sudden, everywhere she turned, people were talking about Sai Baba. She goes to her therapist, and her therapist says, yes, I just know 2 people who came back from the ashram in India. I know them, and not only do I know them, I knew them before they went, and now I know them since they've come back, and they're totally transformed. She began meeting people who began speaking of Sai Baba. All of a sudden, she began doing her own research, and the most important research she began doing was on her own self, to begin to remove the fear that was going to keep her from making the inevitable step that she had to make. See, it's inevitable. Once we know it's inevitable that we have to move, that we have to leave this small pot, that we have to move to this bigger place, once it's inevitable, then we just have to get busy doing the work in front of us. Now we have 2 choices. The ego, the smaller part of us, the little part of our mind, will get busy being so panicked and fearful. You'll probably be getting high all the time. You'll be in total fear or shut down, be in complete denial. There are many ways we can go. And all of them have to do with we ain't leaving where we are and we dig our heels in even more. Or we get busy with that same energy and we take that energy and begin to do the work we need to do, which is how do I get myself there? Not what plane tickets do I need and how do I make the reservations, but the inner work to create a space in us so the fear steps aside and we can just do what's inevitable for us to do. We work on our fear. We work on our panic. We work on our faith with God. We work on communicating with the presence of Spirit so that we can walk with Spirit instead of alone. We begin to do the work that we can do so that what inevitably happens, inevitably in our lives as in her, she steps out into the desert. She's making this 27-hour trip and she's going there for 6 months. She's not going for a week retreat. She's going for 6 months. She's leaving everything behind and she is going for 6 months to this ashram. And she has no idea even what to expect. She said, the one thing I know that's going to happen, and that's all I know, is that I am going to uncover who I am, more of who I am. Not all of who I am, more of who I am. And man, isn't that all that the spiritual path ever says? This journey is about finding out about more of who we are. Because the more we know about who we are, the stronger we get. We don't get stronger by taking workshops. We get stronger by taking little steps out in our journey, and with every step we find out one more thing about us. By even signing up for this retreat, she's found out something about her. She said, and I asked her, I said, are you scared? She says, no, I'm not scared. She says, first of all, why should I be scared? I'm not scared of dying, and I'm not scared to change. Do you know how awesome that is? You really have to understand how awesome not being afraid of change is, because if we're not afraid of change, then that means that life that knows exactly what we want and how to get us there can just do its work through us unobstructed. How utterly cool. That we can just open our arms. What is the saying by Ramakrishna? Open, lift up your sails. The winds of God are blowing. Lift up your sails. That's what it means to work through your fear of change. You lift up your sails, and where are you led? You're not led to the cliff to crash on the rocks. You're led right into the kind of life you've been dreaming of having as you go through the desert, picking up your skills en route to getting it. Every step in the desert is going to make you more and bigger and stronger and bolder and more courageous. So by the time the life you want comes, the love, the family, the success, the whatever, you're able to plant your feet and be in the present moment and enjoy it. You're able to put out your arms and hold it so that it doesn't fall in on you. You're able to hold all that success and enjoy it moment to moment. You're able to hold it and be with it. You're able to enjoy it as it comes. Because things that come that we can't hold, we lose. Big things that come that we can't hold destroy us. Why in the world would so many teenagers in Hollywood be on heroin? It's not because, they're bad and evil and sinful. For God's sakes, it's not that. If you can't hold that kind of success, you're going to crumble under it, and the same goes for us. We don't take the little plant that we were and put it in a gigantic field. We take the little plant we were and put it in the next bigger pot, and then the next bigger pot, and then the next bigger pot. But we have to be willing to leave the original one in order to make it to the next one. And what is the promise? The promise is that in each of us lives that swan. In each of us there is that divine swan. That's who we are. It's what we were born to be. It's what we came here to do and be and express. That's why it's inevitable, because it's not something we do being that swan. It's something that we are. That's why it's got to express itself. And you got to let it. It's inevitable. So let's go within. Oh man, take a breath into your bodies and feel yourself planted in the center of this present moment, knowing that there's one of you and only one of you, and that you have come here to fulfill your beautiful and significant and magnificent destiny. and that you have been born with the power, and you will be given every single tool you need to go that distance from where you are to the next step, to the next step, to the next step, to where you need to be. Every step of it is guided. Every step will be lit. And as much as you might feel like you're going to have to walk these steps alone, not one of your steps will ever, ever, ever have to be taken alone. This is your destiny, and it is inevitable. With every breath you take, just simply say yes. Amen.